king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 159, Opening up the Trade Route. Now that Prince Philip has succeeded in the election, it is time for Marin to reap the fruits of victory. First, Marin took out the IOU for more than 80,000 gold coins that he had signed with Marin before and began to revise it. Marin is a person who pays great attention to contracts. He believes that verbal promises are empty, especially for politicians. There is not much difference between verbal promises and false promises. Therefore, signing an agreement in black and white is the only guarantee. After the reception to celebrate Prince Philip's successful election, Marin waited for Prince Philip to sober up the next day and then began to revise the specific treaty with him. First of all, it is the commercial treaty. Marin spent 80,000 gold coins to help Prince Philip take the position of Grand Master, but it was not given for free, and he had to pay back. Of course, Prince Philip himself has no money, but after becoming the Grand Master, he can provide escort services for Marin to come to the Teutonic Kingdom to make money. After all, the Grand Master is the supreme leader of the Teutonic Kingdom. To this end, Marin and Philip signed an agreement, stipulating that the two parties jointly establish a Chamber of Commerce in the name of Prince Philip. This Chamber of Commerce is under the name of Prince Philip, but the management rights belong to Marin. The investment of the Chamber of Commerce is also borne by Marin. The final profit is 80:2, Marin gets 80% and Prince Philip gets 20%. Of course, this is the initial share. When Marin earns enough 90,000 gold coins, the agreement will be automatically modified to Marin 60% and the Prince 40%. This Chamber of Commerce mainly engaged in salt trade in the early stage. To this end, Marin planned to add a batch of salt boiling pots in Yencheng, and let Hoffman Manor increase coal production. He also planned to hand over part of the order to Hamler Manor, the family's in-law, to supply the needs of salt boiling. Although the bituminous coal produced by Hamler Knight territory produces a lot of smoke when burned, which pollutes the environment, who cares? Anyway, the downwind of Yencheng is Terhorncher, not Denburg. Selling salt in the Teutonic Knights' kingdom and selling salt in Germany are two completely different concepts. Marin sold salt in Germany at a wholesale price of only 4 shillings per quarter. This is because Marin's salt has no bitterness and is a high-quality salt. This salt was sold at a wholesale price of more than 10 shillings per quarter in the Teutonic Knights country, which was short of salt, and even in the entire Baltic region. The profit was more than double that of selling it in Germany. The Teutonic Knights state is about 36,000 square kilometers in size, nearly 100 times the size of all the islands in Marin combined, and has a large population of about 300,000. In addition to the Prussians and Poles who originally lived there are also many wandering knights who flock from Germany every year. Fortunately, the eastern coast of the Baltic Sea, which is the area of the 3 Baltic states in later generations, has a higher proportion of women, probably because of the climate. People here give birth to more girls, so there is no imbalance between men and women. Basically, all the wandering knights who came to the Teutonic Kingdom, as long as they had something to do, could find a wife. Of course, selling salt here does not mean that it must be sold only to the people of the Teutonic Kingdom. Instead, the Hanseatic merchants of the Teutonic Kingdom can also sell the salt to nearby Poland, Lithuania, and even Novgorod, Russia. Although the Teutonic Knights were in a state of hostility with Poland and Lithuania, it did not prevent people from both sides from doing business. In addition, salt was a scarce commodity in the Baltic region, so merchants from the two countries often bought salt from Hanseatic merchants in the Teutonic Knights and shipped it back to their own countries for sale. Poland was in a good situation because they were close to Germany in the west and could import, relatively, cheap salt from Germany. But Lithuania was not so lucky and could only rely on salt re-exported from the Teutonic Knights. It was not that there were no Polish merchants who could transport salt. However, the cost of land transportation was much higher than that of sea transportation. The salt from the Teutonic Knights was transported directly to Königsberg by Hanseatic merchants using sea vessels through the Kattegat Strait between Denmark and Sweden, and the transportation cost was relatively low. If Polish merchants imported salt from eastern Germany at 5 shillings per quarter and transported it across Poland to Lithuania, the cost would definitely be more than 10 shillings per quarter. Because, in addition to the high cost and small volume of land transportation, the numerous tax checkpoints on land are also an important reason for the high cost of land transportation. Therefore, to buy salt in the eastern Baltic Sea, you still have to go to the Teutonic Knights and the Livonian Knights. Because the salt from these two places was transported by Hanseatic merchants on merchant ships. On the way, the merchant ships only need to collect taxes once in the Danish waters, and do not need to pass through the numerous tax checkpoints on land. However, not everyone can sell salt in the Teutonic Knights. Salt, a strategic material, requires a business license in the Teutonic Knights. No one is allowed to sell salt without a license. But who is Prince Philip? After the coronation, he is the Grand Master of the Teutonic Knights. Why can't he grant himself a license to trade in salt? Therefore, Marin has now entered the Teutonic salt trade system. In the future, the profits will be huge. The port of Königsberg can be said to be a major port for salt trade on the eastern coast of the Baltic Sea. As a group leader, it is extremely easy to run a salt business here. Of course, this is simple, in the sense that Prince Philip, as the Grand Master, can easily obtain a license, but it does not mean that you can easily engage in this kind of business if you have a license. You have to know that even if you have a license, you still have to be able to import salt. In this era, the production of salt in Europe is low, so the price is high. The salt production in the UK is quite high because it uses a lot of coal to cook salt. However, British salt is not only supplied to Eastern Europe, but also to England, Scotland, Ireland, France, the Lowlands, and northern Germany. In short, there are many buyers for British salt, so there is no worry about sales. Moreover, the licensing system set up by Hanseatic merchants to suppress competitors blocked the possibility of others intervening. Although it was very profitable to transport salt to the eastern coast of the Baltic Sea for sale, without a license, the British could not intervene in the salt trade here. Marin had previously thought about selling salt to the Baltic region where the price was high, but when he inquired, he found out that a license was required there, so he gave up the idea. But now it's different. Marin spent a lot of money to promote Prince Philip to the high position of the Teutonic Grand Master. With Prince Philip's status, he can give Marin a salt sales license. So, Marin can finally intervene in the lucrative salt trade in the Baltic Sea region. Although the Hanseatic merchants had set up trading posts in Britain and monopolized the import of British salt, Marin's Salt City was a new salt production base that was not under the jurisdiction of the old Hanseatic merchants. Therefore, Marin could safely transport salt to the Teutonic Knights for sale, and was also protected by the new Grand Master. Of course, Marin also needs to guard against competitors who might hijack his salt ship. Therefore, when Marin transports salt, he needs to use armed merchant ships with self-defense capabilities to protect his own interests. To this end, Marin plans to order several armed merchant ships to transport salt collectively to ensure the safety of the ships. Of course, the Teutonic Knights did not only have salt as a commodity. For example, when the ship returned, Marin could also let the merchant ship carry some Eastern European specialties such as grains, furs, wood, linen, etc., and bring them back to Western Europe for sale. These products are very cheap in Eastern Europe, but much more expensive in Western Europe. Although the profit is not as high as selling salt, the ship always has to load cargo in the cabin when it returns. After all, whether you have cargo or not, you still have to pay taxes in the Kattegat when you return empty. Moreover, the Danes' way of taxation is very special. They don't look at the quantity and value of your goods, but at your deck area. Even if it is an empty ship, they will still measure the deck and seriously levy taxes on you. If you dare not pay, the powerful Danish navy will teach you a lesson in minutes. After Marin and Prince Philip signed the Trade and Mutual Assistance Treaty, they talked about Marin's uncle Jules. Originally, Marin wanted to take Jules to the Wadden Islands. After all, Jules had more than 10 years of experience as a civil servant and could help with government affairs. However, considering the huge interests of the Teutonic Knights, Marin was also afraid that Prince Philip would cheat him in the future. Therefore, Marin decided to keep this honest and capable uncle in the Teutonic Knights to help Prince Philip handle government affairs while helping him to look after the trade situation. Moreover, Prince Philip is very short of manpower now, and placing Jules under him will also help him to be of great use. In a few years, Jules may become a powerful minister of the Teutonic Knights, which will be of greater help to him. Thinking of this, when exchanging the contract, Marin also wrote Jules' arrangement into the contract, asking Prince Philip to reuse Jules. To this, Prince Philip also agreed. Because Prince Philip was very confident in an honest man like Jules. If he replaced him with a cunning one, Prince Philip himself would not be at ease. However, although the treaty was signed, Marin was not ready yet. First of all, the salt boiling pot in Yenching had not been added yet. And the ships and personnel engaged in trade and transportation were not in place. However, with the support of the new Grand Master of Teutonic, this trade route has been opened. The other specific steps will be completed sooner or later. Chapter 160, Enclosure Proposal. After signing the agreement, Marin originally planned to return to the Wadden Islands because he hadn't been there for several months. Seeing that the new year was approaching, he planned to rush back to spend the rest of his life there. However, Prince Philip stopped him and asked him to give more suggestions. For example, how to build the economy of the Teutonic Knights. Prince Philip was not worried about the military, because he planned to ask his two brothers for help, asking them to send a group of officers to help him lead the army. However, when it came to building the economy, none of the three brothers had any good ideas. But along the way, Prince Philip found that Marin was a very thoughtful person, so he asked Marin for advice. You know, Prince Philip once knew that Marin's territory, Texel Island, was originally a remote and poor place with no one living there, but after Marin went there, it took only 1 or 2 years to build Texel Island into a very wealthy territory, and he was able to give out more than 80,000 gold coins to support him as the leader. Therefore, Prince Philip admired Marin's ability to manage the economy very much, and even worshipped him a little. Marin did not answer him immediately, but thought for a long time and asked the prince to send someone to check the information. Through the internal data of the Teutonic Knights, Marin learned that the Teutonic Knights only had 36,000 square kilometers of land and 300,000 people. You know, the data also showed that in 1402, the Teutonic Knights had a land area of 170,000 square kilometers and a population of 1 million. However, after the Battle of Tannenberg, the Teutonic Knights lost a large amount of territory, and the Livonian Knights demanded autonomy and broke away from the control of the Knights. That is why it has come to this point. However, 36,000 square kilometers of land is not a small amount. At least, this data made Marin envious. Moreover, the data showed that out of the 300,000 people in the country, about 200,000 people were concentrated in the 4 Hanseatic cities, as well as the towns and villages near the 4 cities. Other places were sparsely populated. Marin knew about the climate conditions here, which was between the temperate oceanic climate and the cold temperate continental climate. The winter here was much colder than that in Western Europe. At least, Western Europe had the North Atlantic warm current to warm it up, and the average winter temperature was not below 0 degrees. But here, because there was no warming effect like the North Atlantic warm current, and the cold air from the East European steppes blew from Western Siberia from time to time, the winter temperature here was generally around -9 degrees, which was colder than the Western European region at the same latitude. However, this is not too cold. At least, it is far from the cold in northeast China. Moreover, the summer temperature here is also okay, averaging 17 degrees, and the highest can reach more than 20 degrees. Of course, the summer temperature here cannot catch up with the average temperature in July in Harbin, HLJ, which can reach 23 degrees. Therefore, in the summer, crops that require high temperatures to grow, such as rice and wheat, can be grown in northeast China, but this is not the case here, because the accumulated temperature in the summer is not enough. Therefore, the only crops suitable for planting here are cold-resistant rye, potatoes, beets, flax, etc. However, the soil here does not seem to be fertile enough, and the harvest does not seem to be as good as that of Hoffman Manor. Perhaps the soil fertility is insufficient. However, Marin was not willing to reveal the technique of using manure to Philip. So he began to think about other things. In this era, the major European trades were grain, salt, furs, timber, spices, livestock, and textiles. Among these things, textiles have the highest added value because they are woven from wool, which involves labor. Moreover, the profit from selling them is very high. However, the wool textile industry is currently mainly concentrated in the Flanders region of the Netherlands and the United Kingdom. However, the British wool textile industry has just started, and Flanders is the most developed. However, in the beginning, most of the wool textile industry in Western Europe imported wool from the United Kingdom. Therefore, the profit of raising sheep is still quite good. Moreover, as the UK stopped exporting wool, the price of wool in the Western European market rose. Even in the UK, wool was in short supply. In Flanders, many textile factories closed down because the UK stopped exporting wool. Therefore, in recent years, Flanders has also started to raise sheep. However, Flanders is a small region with a large population. In addition, there are many farmlands. Therefore, it is difficult for sheep farming to flourish in Flanders. However, the demand for wool was so great that the British later had a crooked idea and started the enclosure movement. Although the enclosure movement harmed the interests of many poor farmers, it revitalized the British economy and brought a lot of tax revenue to the British government. Because, whether it was the wool trade or the export of textiles, it could bring a lot of pound taxes and export taxes to the British government. Therefore, the British economy gradually rose, and the British government also had money to carry out the great voyages. The Teutonic Knights had so much open space, making it very suitable for raising sheep. Of course, if you want to raise sheep in Eastern Europe, you must solve a very important problem, that is the problem of winter feed for livestock. Due to the lack of winter fodder, many European herders had to slaughter a large number of livestock and salt them before wintering. Otherwise, there would not be enough winter fodder. Of course, if it is a grassland area, there is no such problem. Because in the European farming areas, there is a lack of grass. In winter, even hay is also scarce. Unless it is a grassland area, there is enough grass. It just so happened that the Teutonic Knights had a large area of unowned grassland. However, only many areas near the coast and near the big rivers were stocked with horses, cattle and sheep. Many inland areas were still undeveloped. Thinking of this, Marin suggested to Prince Philip that he should vigorously develop wool sheep breeding in the Teutonic Knights, because the market for wool in Europe was very good at the moment. Raising sheep. I know that, but I heard that it's hard to get sheep feed in winter. Before winter, many farmers start slaughtering sheep and salting them. Prince Philip also learned about the lives of the lower classes and knew a lot. Your Highness, that's in the Rhine region, where there's little land and many people, and there's not enough grass. But in the inland areas of the Teutonic Kingdom, there's a lot of barren grassland. How do sheep survive in winter? Build a hay barn, and have farmers harvest hay before winter and pile it in the hay barn. In winter, they can use the hay to feed the sheep. Do we need to harvest and store grass? Prince Philip was a little surprised. In Europe, people in the Middle Ages were not used to storing grass. When winter came, they liked to slaughter sheep and pickle them. Of course, otherwise what will we do if the sheep starve to death in the winter? Not only do we need to store fodder, but we also need to build a simple sheep shed to keep out the cold. Otherwise, in the cold winter in Eastern Europe, even sheep with long fur will freeze to death. Okay, I've learned something new. But is raising sheep really a promising future? Of course, you can send someone to Flanders to ask if there is a shortage of wool there. Ah. I think I've heard about the wool shortage in Flanders. Isn't that it? How to promote sheep farming. It's simple, enclosure. Then, Marin began with a devilish smile and explained to Prince Philip the method of enclosure. However, Marin's enclosure method was very different from that of the British and was much milder. The enclosure in Britain was the aristocracy forcibly occupying the farmers' cultivated land. The enclosure that Marin was talking about was encouraging the Teutonic Knights to occupy those uninhabited public wastelands. In addition, Marin suggested that those areas with poor land and low food production should also be fenced off. Only the fertile land near the river should be kept as arable land. Growing food on poor land will yield very low returns, but there is no problem using it to graze sheep. In other words, Marin asked Prince Philip to occupy all the public wasteland and some barren arable land in the Teutonic Knights' country, and transform them into pastures for large-scale sheep breeding. Sheep not only provide wool, but also meat and pork, which are very economical. Moreover, they are easy to manage. At most, some labor is needed for shearing wool, delivering ewes, and harvesting grass for storage. Usually, serfs are sent to drive the sheep to graze. Even sheepdogs, which are commonly used by the British, can be introduced to help herd sheep and guard. As the price of wool in the market continues to rise, the profit of raising sheep is very high. At the same time, allowing the Teutonic Knights to enclose land would also allow them to gain many benefits, making them more supportive of Prince Philip and more loyal. Moreover, the Teutonic Knights were different from other European countries. In the Teutonic state, nobles and knights also had to pay taxes. Therefore, the more land was enclosed, the higher the fiscal revenue of the Teutonic state would be. This was also beneficial to the economic development of the Teutonic state, and it would allow the Teutonic state to spend more money to hire Swiss mercenaries. In fact, Marin originally planned to raise sheep on his territory. However, his territory was too small and the population was small. Now, his territory added up to only more than 300 square kilometers, not even as large as a fraction of the Teutonic kingdom. As a visionary man, Marin also hoped to develop industry. The most basic industry is the textile industry. The development of the textile industry can promote the invention of machines. With machines, society will have greater progress. Moreover, the tax revenue brought by the textile industry is also very considerable. Marin found in the information provided by Prince Philip that although the area of the Teutonic Knight state had shrunk a lot, nearly half of the land had not yet been developed. If all of it could be used to graze sheep, I wonder how many sheep could be raised. If Marin develops the textile industry in the future, he doesn't need to raise sheep himself. He can import wool from the Teutonic Knights and then produce woolen textiles to sell to other countries and regions. In this way, he can collect a lot of import and export taxes, and provide jobs for a large number of people to solve their living problems. In short, encouraging the Teutonic Kingdom to enclose land and raise sheep is not only beneficial to the Teutonic Kingdom, but also beneficial to Marin's future development of the textile industry in his own territory and promoting economic development. Chapter 161 Hide and Seek in the Atlantic Ocean. The boundless Atlantic Ocean was rolling with waves. On the ocean surface, a few small black dots were moving forward with the waves. Columbus, wearing a Zorro black cloth mask, sighed, then climbed up the tower of the flagship and used the artifact given to him by Marin, the telescope, to continue to sneak a peek at the sea to the east. It was already the 5th month and 16th day since Columbus had followed Vasco da Gama's fleet. According to the calendar, it was already the day before Christmas. In front, da Gama's fleet had crossed the Cape of Good Hope, which was specially marked by Marin on the map, and began to leave the Atlantic Ocean and sail eastward along the southern tip of the African coast. According to the world map given by Marin, which did not mark the western outline of America and the Ming Empire, but only drew India, Columbus knew that da Gama's fleet was heading towards the Indian Ocean. Columbus had to admire the accuracy of Marin's intelligence source. Marin even indicated in the instructions he gave him that da Gama's fleet would cross the Cape of Good Hope and sail eastward around Christmas Eve. Originally, during the 5 months in the Atlantic Ocean, Columbus also relied on Marin's route map to track da Gama's fleet. Although the map and route Marin provided were very rough and too general. For example, the hydrological and wind direction data along the coast of West Africa were incomplete. However, this map alone was worth a fortune. In fact, it was priceless. Because, on this map, the location of India is clearly marked. Where is India? It is the origin of spices imported from Europe. Europeans use a lot of spices and spend a lot of money on them. According to Marin, pepper, which sells for more than 10 shillings per pound in Europe, sells for only 1 or 2 pfennigs at most in India. The value difference is more than 60 times. According to Marin, as long as the Indian route is opened, it will bring great wealth. Apart from other things, the pepper trade alone can make a huge profit of up to 60 times. This is the profit after deducting the sailing expenses, because the price of pepper in India is not as high as 2 pfennigs per pound, usually around 1 pfennig. Even at cost of 2 pfennigs per pound, including sailing expenses, there is still a full 60 times profit. Originally, Columbus was somewhat skeptical about the navigation map given by Marin. However, after Columbus discovered that da Gama's fleet had indeed begun to turn, he became convinced of Marin's judgment. Now, Columbus was extremely sure that the Mombasa and Malindi Emirates that Marin mentioned must exist. Moreover, Marin magically asked Columbus not to stay in Mombasa, but to go directly to Malindi and express hostility towards Mombasa. It is said that the two countries are mortal enemies, and as long as they express hostility towards Mombasa, they may gain the favor of Malindi. Then, according to the script provided by Marin, Columbus will borrow the Arab navigator Majid under the chief of Malindi to guide Columbus to reach India. At this moment, Columbus even suspected that Marin was a prophet, who could accurately calculate the movements of the da Gama fleet. However, he did not want to meddle in other people's business. As long as he could discover India first, then his past shame would be washed away. Once, Columbus discovered a wild continent and insisted that it was India. It was not that Columbus really thought it was India. But if everyone knew it was not India, his reputation would plummet. Moreover, Queen Isabella I of Spain, who had funded him, would also turn against him. Because when the two sides cooperated, it was clearly stated that Columbus was helping the Queen explore India, not some wild continent. If the Queen is sure that it is not India, then the Queen may take back Columbus's title and wealth. Sure enough, after the syphilis incident, when all of Europe knew that the place Columbus discovered was not India, Queen Isabella decisively turned hostile. Before the Spanish discovered Mexico and Peru, which had gold and silver, the New World was actually worthless compared to India. Because the discovery of India would immediately bring huge benefits. The profits from the spice trade alone would be terrifying. As for the New World discovered by Columbus, the Spanish could only send people to the West Indies to plant sugarcane. The Queen's advance team had already been sent there, but it was very troublesome to cultivate tropical islands. Not to mention anything else, the poisonous snakes, poisonous insects, and beasts on those islands could pose a great threat to the advanced developers. Being bitten by poisonous insects, contracting a serious illness and dying was just a common thing. Columbus collected his wandering thoughts and continued to observe the situation of da Gama's fleet through the telescope. These months of life at sea left Columbus with many emotions. Sailing was Columbus' greatest skill and reliance. However, what also made Columbus feel amazing was that after more than 5 months, no one on the ship died of scurvy. You know, when he led a team to the New World, many sailors died of scurvy. Sailors were generally in very good health, and those with poor physiques could not do this job. Generally speaking, sailors rarely suffered from minor illnesses such as colds. Even if they did occasionally, they could rely on their strong bodies to get through it. Therefore, the deaths of sailors were generally either from scurvy, starvation, shipwreck, or death from fighting with pirates or internal strife. But more than 5 months passed, and because Marin forced every crew member to soak in water with a mysterious herb every day, no one on the crew suffered from scurvy. Columbus almost worshipped Marin. But he also knew what kind of secret it was. With this method, the safety of navigation would be greatly increased. As long as there was no enemy or huge storm, the safety of the crew was greatly guaranteed. Moreover, the method of preserving fresh water that Marin specifically requested also amazed Columbus, because after boiling the fresh water in the oak barrel in a large pot, plugging it with a cork and sealing it with mud, the fresh water could indeed be preserved for a much longer time. In the past, a barrel of fresh water would go bad and stink in 6 or 7 days. However, the fresh water preserved in this way has not gone bad or changed its taste for 5 months. Of course, after opening the seal and cork, it must be consumed within a few days, otherwise it will still stink. Columbus didn't know that this was the most primitive way of canning. Although the sealing performance of the seal is not as good as paraffin or beeswax, it is much better than just using cork without sealing. According to Marin's understanding, cork is breathable, so it cannot meet the requirements of sealing. After applying sealing wax, it can be sealed. Of course, sealing wax is too expensive, because the wax of this era is basically beeswax, so it is relatively expensive. Unlike later generations, paraffin is extracted from petroleum, and the output is large, so it is not expensive. If you use a piece of beeswax every time you store fresh water, the cost is a bit high. After all, this is fresh water that is frequently used and consumed in large quantities. If it is precious goods, such as spices or wine, it is not so expensive. As for using soft mud to seal, as long as the mud is dried and hardened, the sealing effect is also good. For example, the batch of fresh water that Columbus replenished in the Canary Islands has not gone bad for 5 months. However, it is about to go bad. In fact, some barrels of fresh water that were not sealed well have begun to deteriorate. Because, after all, it is sealed with mud, which is not as good as beeswax. Therefore, Columbus decided to go to the natal area mentioned in the secret guide given by Marin after a distance, find the mouth of a freshwater river, and replenish fresh water. Moreover, the solar cooker provided by Marin was also very effective. Now, with the solar cooker, the sailors on the ship began to drink hot water. When the sun was shining, everyone used the solar cooker to boil water and cook. If it was rainy, the sailors would use the firewood they picked up on the shore when they docked to boil water and cook. Therefore, the crew on board were not as hard as Columbus when he explored the New World, and could only eat cold food and pickled food, but could eat hot meals. As for the telescope, that is needless to say. Now, Columbus could have his fleet hang more than 20 kilometers behind Vasco da Gama's fleet and keep a close eye on Vasco da Gama's whereabouts. Da Gama's fleet still used the old way, having sailors climb up the mast and observe the distance with their naked eyes. Compared with the two, Columbus was able to use a telescope to see the shadows of the masts of Vasco da Gama's fleet to determine the whereabouts of Vasco da Gama's fleet, but Vasco da Gama's sailors did not have such good eyesight and could not spot Columbus's fleet more than 20 kilometers behind. Besides, da Gama never thought that someone would be following their fleet. Because Portugal's exploration of India was kept secret, only the royal family and some important figures in Portugal knew about it. Therefore, da Gama never thought that his fleet would be followed by someone. Even if he lost track temporarily, Columbus was not afraid, because Marin provided a relatively accurate route direction. He just needed to follow the route map and continue to chase forward. You know, Vasco da Gama's discovery of India has appeared repeatedly in textbooks in later generations. Marin remembered Vasco da Gama's route map. He may not know the details, nor the hydrology in wind direction, but the direction of the route is generally accurate. Therefore, Columbus, who had a telescope, relied on the telescope and the route map to play hide-and-seek with Vasco da Gama's fleet all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, from the Portuguese coast all the way to the Cape of Good Hope. Now, Columbus continued to chase Vasco da Gama's fleet, sailing eastward, preparing to enter the marginal waters of the Indian Ocean.